And welcome to an Eternium video where I want to talk about some tips and tricks for Frostbeam Mage that will hopefully help you push into higher trials. Top players will probably be using some, if not all of these, during push. So coming up will be a series of clips where I'll describe and hopefully demonstrate some of these techniques. For PC players, you might not realise this, but the shift button is your friend. Shift and left mouse button will fire the primary attack, shift and right mouse will fire the secondary attack. So sort of clicking here normally with left mouse button or just right mouse button will cause the character to do a suicidal run straight towards these enemies. Players on Steam will know if they've got an enemy targeted because it will be highlighted. But by holding down shift, if I click say about here, you'll see that I attack instead of suicide running. I know I've got their attention. I can do the same to others. I can use similar attacks with the right mouse as well, or the left. So top players, particularly if they've got a gaming mouse, will have that shift button bound somewhere on the mouse to prevent those suicide runs. One tip for when you're rounding up enemies, this might be for experience farming or in push, and you're looking to get through as quickly as possible. You might come across an enemy like this one with a swirly effect on the floor around it which slows your character down considerably. Now what you can do to get around that is use your Frostbeam. You don't want to do a full channel, just a quick blast at that troop. And the reason for it is that we've got this silence effect that comes out on Frostbeam. So a quick blast on this troop, which is currently able to take crowd control effects, will remove that slow. So if you see how slowly my character moves compared to normally, and then if I come in and give him a quick blast, it's removed that effect and I can make a quick escape and move on and carry on rounding up without losing time trying to break free. Again, we've got another one here, so we can give that a quick blast and we're away. Okay, another tip is when you are pulling enemies during the mob phase, what you want to do is sort of get a good idea of what the map looks like. I played so many that I tend to be able to get a feel just from as I'm running around. What we've got here looks like we've got a side channel up the top, another side channel coming out part way down, looks like another one down here towards the end, but essentially it's a sort of rough banana shape or arc that we're going to do. So ideally when you're doing a mob pull, you want to travel down the middle so that you've got sort of enemies on either side of you and pull them in using your shatter so that they will start to move towards your character in the middle of the map. Because by the time we reach the bottom, slow moving enemies from say up here will be moving directly towards me, so they'll be heading towards the inside of this bend in the map, so that by the time I finish pulling enemies at the bottom here, I should then have a clear escape route back round. So let's see how that works out. I'm completely wrong with this map. We'll scrap this recording. No, it is a banana-y shape. So let's see how that has played out. So it is that sort of crescent that I did originally think. We have got one side channel there. We've got one up the top, but we have now pulled enough, but it does give us this escape route around the edge where we can now hopefully ball up all our enemies and beam them away. Okay, so you've managed to get yourself in a very tricky situation and you're completely trapped by all the enemies in front of you. Not the time to panic. You could make use of Vortex to move enemies out of the way and give you a safe escape route from what looked like certain death. You can use Frozen, the Frost Nova skill, to freeze enemies, which means that they won't attack you and you can move safely straight over the top of them. Particularly useful if you are looking to reposition, either because you've got a ball of enemies and you're near the edge of a map and you want to get around them, or similarly you might have a large ball of enemies and then a small tail sticking off them, blocking your way out sort of in a comma shape, and you can freeze the enemies to make safe passage through. So I'll drop in a clip with where I'll have a ball of enemies and they're sort of blocking the edge of the map and I want to reposition to a better place. So use of Frost Nova gets us through that. It's very important to get a good idea of when your equipped talismans are going to pop. So Talisman of Power on a Fire Lily build and the Talisman of Storms on a crit build. These are going to massively increase your damage. In both cases, as we can see, they occur 2 times per minute, and that's while you're attacking. What you want to do ideally is have your Frostbeam ready for when that pops up, so that you can then channel your Frostbeam during that phase when you'll get maximum damage from it. Now, since Frostbeam, depending on your ability rate, is going to be somewhere between 11, 12, 13 seconds, that means roughly 50% of your Frostbeams should be made when you have a talisman active. Certainly when you're on higher trials you want to be doing that. Less so much of a problem lower down when the enemies don't have quite so much health. Those talismans will only trigger if you are attacking, so if you have messed up slightly, your Frostbeam's still on cooldown and you think, hang on, I know this, it's been 15, 12 seconds since this last popped and I would like my Frostbeam available for the next one. Stop attacking, try and kite the boss for a few seconds until your Frostbeam's available, restart the attack. Once this triggers you can Frostbeam in at maximum damage. Very useful also on the mob phase. You can get maximum damage into those on your higher trials. As I say, you're looking for 50%, or every other Frostbeam should be done during one of those talismans being active. What I'll do is drop in some clips, probably just Kara at 130. I'll use this character, we'll do a Frostbeam on her with no talisman active, a Frostbeam with Talisman of Power active, and then I'll jump on a crit build and do a Frostbeam with Talisman of Storms active, just so you can get an idea of the difference in damage that happens when those talismans are in play. And to save you from sort of going back and having to recheck how the damage looks across those three different beams, quick little summary chart. Sakara at troll level 130 of a single Frostbeam while she was at full health. So when we had absolutely no talisman active at all, we did a sizable chunk, but not too impressive. On the Fire Lily build with the Talisman of Power active, you can see we've done roughly double the amount of damage, and on a crit build you can see the strength of crit builds over Fire Lily with even more damage coming in. Now, had other effects come into play, for example Slayer on the weapon, then we'd see sort of double this damage being done. So with no talisman but Slayer would probably be down near what Talisman of Power on its own does. Talisman of Power with Slayer is going to have done damage down to about here, and Talisman of Storms with Slayer would have taken Kara right down into this sort of region. A lot of damage going out, so we really want to try and time your frost beams with your active talismans. Obviously you'll get one without, and then one with, and then the next one without, and the next one with is what you're aiming to do. And next up, this one is for PC players only. It's the double Vortex. So we will gather up a group of enemies. This is particularly useful when used in conjunction with a talisman being active, such as now. We'll cast into the vortex as they split vortex again for maximum damage. Hold them in whilst the talisman is active. It's got to be used with care. Obviously you will want a vortex available for your next Frostbeam, and you also need to pay attention to crowd control immunity, which will feed into our next tip. Okay, so crowd control and crowd control immunity. I do have a very detailed video of that on this channel, but it's something that you need to bear in mind, particularly on higher trolls when you'll have a large group of enemies chasing you that are going to take a few minutes to kill. And basically the crowd control immunity comes from the more times you're using your Frostbolt, Frostnova, Frostbeam and Vortexes, then a grey bar starts to build over your enemies' heads until eventually when you hit them with another one it will turn blue, and now they're completely immune to crowd control effects. So if you're trying to manage a large group of enemies, you don't really want to be hitting your skills on all of them or a large group. You want to try and target as few as possible when you're doing your Frost Novas. So it takes a bit of getting used to. Let's see if we can demonstrate out in the real world. So ideally we want the bulk of the enemies to be losing some of their immunity to crowd control as we go along. Let's try not to kill everything too quickly. Hopefully we can ball everything up and demonstrate. So if I just hit a few of them there, then no one else is becoming immune to crowd control effects. Again, I can just hit that one there. Everyone else can be vortex safely. by hitting as few as possible, it means that our vortexes are going to ensure that we're sucking all the enemies in. Should have watched that meteor, but I was more interested in demonstrating, so you can see they're all still capable of being crowd controlled. Okay, so the next tip is around your use of Frostbeam and movement after you do Frostbeam. First thing that I would say is that tend not to do a full channel of Frostbeam unless you're using a double vortex, or you know that the group of enemies in front of you in the blob has no ranged attack. When you've got a general group, as I have in this instance, then you need to assume that all of them are ranged attack, and as they break you need to move off. So if I draw in some lines of where attacks could come in from range. Okay, so I've taken the two extremes of this main group. We can see that a ranged attack coming in would give us an area here that would be extremely dangerous to move into. Anything in this group will be firing into that area. Now, assuming these rocks weren't here and I could move in this direction, moving directly away is going to be deadly. Moving in this direction, we've got a couple of archers up here, they're going to be firing through that distance as well. So the safest route out of this is either down this way or out in this direction. We don't want to move towards the enemy. If we do that, we're more likely to be hit by ranged attacks and be killed instantly. So I'll roll the video on and show that I escape out in this direction. So what we're going to see is the enemy groups start to break up, and there's actually going to be some ranged attackers move in this direction and then fire towards me, and I will move off safely. You saw the attacks all go up into the danger zone. So when you're doing your beaming, you're looking at moving out sideways from the direction of your channel, as it's going to offer the safest route against ranged attacks.